It was just another monotonous Monday morning at school. I dragged myself out of bed after hitting snooze on my alarm at least 5 times. I was exhausted from staying up too late the night before watching movies. As I got ready in the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of my disheveled bedhead in the mirror and let out a groan. I looked like a mess and felt like one too. After getting dressed and gathering my things, I headed downstairs to the kitchen. My mom had already left for work, so I quickly ate a bowl of cereal before heading out the door. The morning air was crisp and cool as I walked to school. Fall was definitely here. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as I made my way down the sidewalk. Things seemed relatively normal at first, but when I got to school, that's when things started to feel off. As I walked down the main hallway towards my locker, I noticed some kids whispering and pointing in my direction. I figured maybe there was something on my face or my hair was sticking up, but every time I would turn to look at them, they would quickly avert their eyes and pretend like nothing happened. Strange. I tried to shake it off as I spun the combination on my locker. It was probably just my imagination running wild since I was so exhausted. But when I opened my locker door, an uneasiness washed over me. Taped to the inside of the door was a photo of me sleeping in my bed from the night before. What the hell? How did someone get this photo? I tore it off the door in disbelief. My hands shook as I stuffed it in my backpack. I quickly gathered my books and rushed off to my first period class. That first part of the day dragged on slowly. I couldn't focus on any of my classes or conversations with friends. My mind kept going back to that photo from my bedroom. Was I being stalked? Pranked? I had no idea what was going on. A few times throughout the morning, I noticed a faint shadow trailing behind me in the halls. Whenever I spun around, though, no one was there. A chill went down my spine. I was getting seriously freaked out. By the time lunch rolled around, I had worked myself into a total state of paranoia. I wasn't hungry at all as I sat picking at my food. My friends chatted around me, but their voices faded into the background. All I could focus on was scanning the cafeteria. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed someone sitting alone at a table on the other side of the room. He was hunched over, quietly eating what looked like the exact same lunch as me: a turkey sandwich, an apple, and a bag of chips. It took me a minute to comprehend what I was seeing. That guy had my face. He was the spitting image of me. Same hair, same clothes, same everything. It was like looking in a mirror, except I was staring directly at my doppelganger from across the cafeteria. I blinked hard a few times, certain my exhausted mind was playing tricks on me. But when I opened my eyes, he was still there, calmly eating my lunch with my face. What the hell? I must be hallucinating. I jumped up from the table, my chair screeching loudly behind me as I booked it out of the cafeteria. My breathing became ragged, and my heart pounded in my ears. I sprinted into the bathroom and clutched the sides of the sink, staring into the grimy mirror above it. But it was just my plain old ordinary reflection looking back at me. No doppelganger in sight. I splashed some cold water on my face and tried to get a grip. I was just overtired and letting my imagination get the best of me. There was no creepy clone of me roaming the school. I was being ridiculous. With my head a bit clearer, I finished up the rest of the afternoon without incident. I made sure not to glance in the direction of that cafeteria table again, though, not wanting to trigger another bout of panic. By the time the final bell rang, I felt like I could write the whole thing off as some bizarre daydream. I stopped at my locker to switch out my textbooks before heading home. Inside my locker, a note was taped front and center. Do I look familiar? My blood ran cold. This was not just my imagination, someone was terrorizing me. I yanked down the note with trembling hands and took off, wanting to get as far from school as possible. I could feel a presence behind me, closing in. The sound of matching footsteps echoed my own. I ran faster, not daring to look back. My lungs burned and my breath came out in ragged gasps. I had never been so terrified. Just a few more blocks to go until I was home. I was almost there. The footsteps behind me sounded nearer now, but I refused to turn around. I flew up my porch steps and fumbled with my house key with shaking hands. As soon as I was safely inside with the door locked behind me, I collapsed against it, trying to calm my breathing. From the front window, I could see a figure standing under the street lamp outside my house. It was me, staring back with a twisted smile. He waved slowly before turning and walking away. disappearing into the growing darkness. I slid to the floor as the panic overwhelmed me. This was not just some elaborate prank. Somehow, I was being haunted by a sinister clone of myself that only I could see. He was always there on the periphery, following my every move with a cold smile. Over the next few weeks, the fear and paranoia intensified as my doppelganger continued his terrifying game of cat and mouse. At school, brief glimpses of him would appear in reflections or down empty hallways, always staying just out of clear eyesight. Notes and photos from inside my bedroom would appear daily in my locker. At home, doors would open and footsteps would creak on the second floor when I knew I was alone. Some nights I would wake to see the silhouette of myself standing in the doorway, simply watching me as I pretended to sleep. The troubling incidents escalated even further when physical objects around me started being moved when I wasn't looking. A glass of water switching places, clothes disappearing from my dresser, and appearing in odd places. It was like living with a poltergeist. I became a nervous wreck, terrified to be alone either at school or home. I hardly slept and jumped at the slightest noise. My friends expressed concern, but of course, they couldn't see what I saw or feel the evil presence following me everywhere I went. I felt like I was losing my mind. One night, the activity in my house became violent. As I studied at my desk, books flew from the shelves, crashing into the walls. My computer monitor wobbled before toppling over and shattering on the ground. I heard a menacing laugh identical to my own coming from the hallway. That was the final terrifying straw. Gripped by overpowering dread, I hid myself in the basement and used my cell phone to desperately call my parents. I begged them to come home immediately. The hysterical panic in my voice must have alarmed them since they drove back right away. But when they arrived, the activity had abruptly stopped. Of course, there was no evil clone anywhere, as I tried to explain what had been tormenting me for weeks. My parents exchanged grave looks full of concern and worry about my declining mental state. That night, they comforted and consoled me as best they could. The next day, however, they sat me down for a serious talk. They were extremely disturbed by my behavior and stories of this sinister duplicate. They feared I was having some sort of mental breakdown brought on by severe stress and sleep deprivation. Though I vehemently denied it, they were adamant I see a psychiatrist and consider medication. I reluctantly agreed, if only to prove I wasn't crazy once and for all. I had to get someone else to see what I was experiencing, to validate that this malicious entity haunting me was real. At the psychiatrist's office, I recounted my terrifying ordeal yet again. I noticed the doctor's eyes widen in alarm as I became more and more worked up describing the incidents. He also asked me probing questions about my mental health history, which I had none of. After our extensive session, the doctor urged me to go with my parents to the hospital for some immediate tests. Even though I knew this meant they definitely now thought I was mentally unsound, I again begrudgingly agreed. I had nothing to hide. I was a healthy teenage guy who just happened to be stalked by a creepy supernatural clone from hell. But I was not delusional or unhinged like they seemed so certain of. At the hospital, I was thoroughly examined and subjected to a slew of assessments. The whole time, I felt patronized and frustrated. I maintained that I was of sound mind and being haunted by an actual physical threat, not just my imagination, but clearly, nobody believed me. After the exhaustive testing, I met again with my psychiatrist. The grave expression on his face sent a chill down my spine even before he spoke. After reviewing all the results, he concluded that I was experiencing severe visual and auditory hallucinations along with psychosis consistent with schizophrenia. My stomach dropped hearing this clinical term applied to me. The doctor explained solemnly that based on my age, it was likely I was developing this chronic mental condition that caused breaks with reality. Though I shook my head adamantly in denial. Deep down I knew then my parents had been right to worry. The doctor, along with my parents, strongly recommended I be admitted to the hospital psychiatric ward to stabilize my condition, which had deteriorated rapidly. Though I resisted at first, still asserting my clone was real, eventually I had no fight left in me. I resigned myself to the fact that this was my life now, constantly questioning what was real and what was just in my head. So here I am, writing this from within the confines of the cold, sterile psych ward. I've started heavy medications that make me feel numb and foggy, but even through the haze, I still see him sometimes at the edge of the hallway. He stares at me with my own face, an ever-present phantom mocking my despair. I close my eyes and ask myself, is he still real, or just a cruel trick of my damaged mind? Honestly, I don't know the answer anymore. In this place, nothing feels true except the fear which continues to consume me day and night. I only hope that one day the doctors and meds will silence him for good. Though there are no guarantees my haunting is truly over, and not just beginning.